The orange custody seal was still stretched tight across Whitlock Foods' cooler when Grant Mercer slid my badge through the specimen window slot. "You're terminated, effective immediately." Behind the glass, Dana Cho looked from my badge to the wall clock. The lab courier was due in 11 minutes. Grant raised his voice so the two technicians in accession could hear him. "Your samples are no longer our problem." I walked out while Dana waited behind the glass. I had reached the vestibule when Eli Raines came in with his scanner and belt printer. Grant tried to turn him around, but Eli checked the cancellation receipt in front of Dana. His eyebrows pulled together. "This was canceled by Grant Mercer," he said. Then he looked through the window. "Who owns the account?" "Whitlock does," Dana answered. The receipt trembled in Eli's hand as the printer finished cutting it. What I couldn't understand was why my aunt's signature was at the bottom of my termination letter. "Lena," Dana called. Grant stepped between us. He had always been good at entering a space as if someone had invited him to own it. "She no longer represents Ward Environmental." I wasn't asking Ward Environmental. The lobby had two doors, one to the parking lot and one into accession. Grant had designed it that way during the remodel, right down to the brushed steel frame around the glass. Clients could watch their coolers move from intake to locked refrigeration. Transparency, he'd called it. At that moment, the glass made him look trapped in an aquarium. Eli held up the receipt. "I still need direction from the account owner. Pickup or no pickup?" "Pickup," Dana said. Grant's mouth tightened. "Those samples haven't been released." I could see the chain of custody packet clipped to the cooler handle. My initials crossed the orange tamper tape on both latches. Dana's signature was in the client release box. I had checked it 3 times because Grant had spent the morning hovering around the accession desk, pretending to look for a stapler. "They were released at 2:32, I said. He turned on me. "You need to leave." "I am leaving." Eli glanced at the wall clock. "If they're going, they need to go now." Dana pushed the cooler through the pass-through door herself. Grant reached for the handle, and she kept her hand on it. It was a small thing, that pause. Her navy cuff against the white plastic, his manicured hand inches from hers, neither of them raising their voice. "Move," she said. Grant moved. Eli scanned the label. His printer chirped and produced a second strip of thermal paper. Dana took both receipts, folded them around her phone, and watched him wheel the cooler out. 6 minutes to spare if Route 7 is clear," Eli said to me as he passed. "Construction on Bell Avenue." I know. Of course he did. Eli knew every loading dock, broken elevator, and badly placed speed bump in 3 counties. He also knew when people lied about courier routes. Grant stood inside the lobby, my badge in one hand and my termination letter in the other. "Your personal belongings will be mailed. My lunch is in the refrigerator." For the first time, one of the technicians laughed. It came out as a startled cough. Grant stared at me. "It's the green container," I said. "You can keep the yogurt. The lid doesn't fit right." Then I pushed through the outer door before my legs could decide they were done holding me. The heat in the parking lot smelled like asphalt and the mint gum someone had ground into the curb. My car sat beneath the one tree Grant had wanted cut down because birds kept spotting the hoods. I made it halfway there before Dana caught up with me. "Did you know he canceled it?" "No." "Did you know he was firing you?" I held up the letter. This was my first clue. She didn't smile. Dana wore severity neatly. Her black hair ended in a blunt line at her jaw, and even after 8 hours touring production floors, her blouse never seemed a wrinkle. But she was rubbing the edge of the courier receipt with her thumb. "Why would he cancel a pickup on our account?" "You need to ask him." "I am asking you. And I've just been fired for not saying things I can't support." That landed. Her hand stopped moving. Through the glass, Grant was speaking to someone on his phone. He saw us looking and turned his back. Dana lowered her voice. "Are those samples valid?" "They were collected correctly. They stayed under refrigeration. The seals were intact when Eli took custody." "And the cancellation?" I confirmed the pickup at 10:18 this morning and again at 1:47. I entered both confirmations in the route log. You think he wanted them to miss the hold time? I looked at the receipt in her hand. Dana said, "You're doing that thing." What thing? Answering without answering. It has kept me employed for 9 years. Not as of 3 minutes ago. That one got through. I looked toward my car so she wouldn't see it. Dana folded the receipt again, more carefully this time. The lab will call me when the cooler is accessioned? Yes. Will you? I no longer work here. You know what I mean. My phone was in my purse. Grant hadn't taken that, although I could imagine him making a policy about it later. If you send me the laboratory accession number, I said, I'll tell you what the timestamps mean. Nothing else. Why nothing else? Because right now Grant is probably telling Celia I stole Whitlock's proprietary information on my way out. Did you? My lunch? Green container. Dana almost smiled. It made her look unexpectedly tired. My phone rang before I reached the car. The screen showed Aunt Celia. Dana saw the name. Do you want privacy? Yes. She walked toward her rental car, still holding the receipt. I answered. Hi, Celia. What happened? No hello, no Lena, sweetheart. Celia reserved sweetheart for moments when she already knew the answer and wanted a cleaner one. Grant fired me. I know that. What happened with Whitlock? He canceled their Courier pickup. There was silence on the line, followed by the soft clink of ice in a glass. Celia had been spending most afternoons at home since her hip surgery, conducting company business from a sunroom full of ferns and unopened trade journals. He says the cancellation was part of a contract renegotiation. Then why didn't Whitlock know about it? He says you undermined him in front of a client. He fired me in front of the client. You were insubordinate before he made that decision. I unfolded the termination letter. Her signature leaned harder on the downstrokes than usual. Lena Ward signed birthday cards the same way she signed bank documents, as if affection required witnesses. What did he tell you I did? You refused to implement the centralized pickup plan. I refused to certify it. Lena, 2 facilities would lose Friday coverage. Their samples would age out before Monday. Grant says the new plan meets the contracts. It meets the invoices. It doesn't meet the handling procedures attached to them. The ice clinked again. Celia had taught me the difference. Years ago, she would stand at the accession bench with orange tape stuck to one wrist, quizzing me on hold times while eating almonds from a paper cup. A contract told you what you promised. A procedure told you how to keep the promise. Now, she said, you make every disagreement sound like a contamination event. And Grant makes every contamination event sound like an upsell. That's unfair. So was signing this. The words came out before I could sand down the edges. Her voice cooled. I signed a contingency authorization last week. I did not know he intended to use it today. That should have made me feel better. Instead, I pictured Grant placing the page in front of her between acquisition documents, his sticky note pointing at the line. What was the contingency? If you continued refusing a direct operational instruction, did he tell you what the instruction was? You'll have an opportunity to explain when everyone is calmer. I'm calm. You're in a parking lot discussing company matters with a client. I looked across the rows. Dana had gotten into her rental car, but the door was still open. She was watching Grant through the windshield. I'm discussing the validity of her samples. You don't have authority to do that. Not anymore. Celia exhaled. Go home. Do not contact staff. Do not access company systems. Grant will arrange delivery of your personal items. He already offered to mail my yogurt. Please don't be flippant. I pressed the key fob. My car unlocked with a weak chirp. Why did he cancel the pickup? I just told you. He was negotiating. 11 minutes before the courier arrived? We will discuss it later. Will we? Another silence. Celia's anger was never loud. It became immaculate. I have spent 32 years keeping this company alive. I will not let a family argument jeopardize the sale. There it was. Not whether Grant had endangered a client's samples, not whether he had lied, the sale. "You should call Dana," I said, "before Grant does. Go home, Lena." She hung up. My key shook twice against the ignition before it found the slot. Ward Environmental occupied a converted tile showroom between a plumbing supplier and a company that rented inflatable signs. My aunt bought it when the business outgrew her garage, back when every sample bottle was labeled by hand and coolers were washed with a garden hose behind the building. She'd given Grant the front office because he could sell a skeptical plant manager a service agreement over bad coffee. She gave me accession because I could find one transposed digit in 6 pages of bottle numbers. For a long time, that division worked. Grant brought work in. I made sure the work survived contact with reality. Then a regional testing group named Halcyon Analytics approached Celia about buying us. Grant began wearing jackets to the office. He replaced the battered coffee maker with one that required pods and referred to our clients as the portfolio. Every missed pickup became a margin problem instead of a sample problem. 3 weeks earlier, he had left a spreadsheet on my desk. The title read, Logistics Optimization, ROTS. 7 and 9 were highlighted in yellow. Friday coverage had been removed for 2 manufacturing sites 40 miles west of town. "This can't start next month," I told him. He leaned against my filing cabinet. "That's why I gave it to you now. Their handling plans require same-day transport. Their contracts require standard weekday service. Friday is a weekday, not under the new route definition." I thought he was joking. Grant sometimes delivered bad ideas with a straight face so people would laugh before he negotiated them into slightly less bad ideas. When I didn't laugh, he tapped the spreadsheet. "If they want Friday, they can upgrade." "They already have Friday. They have what we've been giving them. That isn't the same as what they're paying for." "And when they collect under the old schedule, we notify them the Courier window changed. After collection." His expression shifted, just enough. That was the first time I understood he did not see expired samples as a failure. Expired samples meant resampling visits, rush transport, and a conversation about premium coverage. He had not created the hold times. He had simply found a way to make them sell for him. I wrote my objections in a deviation memo. Grant sent it back with one sentence. "Please revise to reflect management direction." I filed it unrevised. Now, sitting in my car with sweat gathering under my collar, I tried to open my company email. The password failed. My root log access was already gone. Grant had moved faster than grief. A text appeared from one of the accession technicians. Mary Bell Soto. "Did the cooler make it?" I typed. "Ask Grant." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then returned. "He told us not to contact you." I erased my first response. "Then you probably shouldn't." This time, the dots stayed away. I drove home with the air conditioner rattling and the termination letter on the passenger seat. At a red light, I noticed a fleck of orange tape stuck to the inside of my wrist. I peeled it off, rolled it between my fingers, and set it beside Celia's signature. My apartment was silent except for the refrigerator motor and my upstairs neighbor dragging something heavy across the floor. I took off my shoes, opened my banking app, and calculated how many months I could last if nothing broke. The answer was not enough. At 4:26, Dana sent the laboratory accession number. At 4:31, she sent a photograph of the receiving record. Cooler temperature, 3.8 degrees Celsius. Seals, intact. All 12 bottles accepted. I zoomed in on the orange strip crossing the latch. My initials looked absurdly small. Then Dana sent one more photograph. It was the cancellation receipt, flattened against her steering wheel. The authorization line was clear. So was the timestamp, 2:41 p.m., 9 minutes after I had recorded the second pickup confirmation. Below the photograph, she wrote, "Whitlock needs an independent review of what happened today. Paid engagement. Are you available tomorrow?" I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Grant had taken my badge, my salary, my access, and if Celia let him, my name inside the company. But he had canceled the wrong account. I turned the screen bright again and typed, We should discuss scope first. Dana's reply came before I could put the phone down. 7 tomorrow. Whitlock Conference Room C, I'll bring procurement. I typed, please bring the current handling plan, the Courier agreement, and today's complete route history. She answered with a thumbs up, which looked unnatural coming from her, like a judge wearing a party hat. At 6:12, Grant emailed my personal address. Lena, this message confirms that your employment with Ward Environmental Services ended today for insubordination, unauthorized client communication, and repeated refusal to follow revised operating procedures. You are reminded that all records, relationships, processes, and work products developed during your employment remain the property of WES. You are not authorized to represent the company, contact its clients or vendors, or retain confidential information. Please acknowledge receipt. Grant read it twice, then opened a fresh document and wrote down the time Dana approached me, the words we exchanged, the moment Eli printed the receipt, and where everyone had been standing. I described Grant's right hand reaching toward the cooler and Dana's hand remaining on the handle. I described the wall clock. I described the second pickup confirmation I had entered at 1:47. Memory changed when frightened people needed it to. I had watched entire rooms become certain of things that never happened. I saved the document and replied to Grant with one sentence. Received. Please preserve all records related to the Whitlock pickup and my termination. He didn't answer. Conference room C was the size of a generous closet. Dana sat at one end of the table with a paper cup and 3 binders. A man with silver-framed glasses introduced himself as Paul Niven from procurement. He had the defeated look of someone who had been told at 6:45 that his day now included chain of custody procedures. You're not a lawyer, he said after we shook hands. No. Good. We have those. Dana slid a coffee toward me. Paul likes to establish disappointment early. It saves time. I opened the top binder. What do you want from me? Dana answered first. I want to know whether Grant endangered our validation samples to pressure us into a new service tier. Paul lifted one finger. We want an independent operational review of yesterday's failure. That's not the same request. No, Dana said. Mine is honest. Yours also assumes the conclusion. She leaned back. Did he? I can't tell you that from one receipt. He canceled the route. That tells us what he did, not the full reason and not whether it was an isolated decision. Paul glanced at Dana as if I had just saved him a difficult sentence. I continued. I can map the handling process, verify yesterday's timestamps, compare them with your agreement, and identify control failures. I won't investigate Ward Environmental's finances. I won't contact their employees. I won't advise you how to terminate a contract. Dana's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. You're worried this looks like revenge. I'm worried about doing bad work. Is that what you think I'm asking for? I think you're angry. I am. So am I. Paul took off his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth from his pocket. This may be the most encouraging procurement meeting I've attended. Dana ignored him. If the review shows deliberate interference, then the review shows deliberate interference. And if it doesn't, I send you a report you're not going to enjoy paying for. Her eyes stayed on mine. Then she pushed a thin folder across the table. Inside was a 2-week engagement letter. The number on the second page was less than my old monthly salary and more money than I had expected anyone to offer me the morning after I'd been fired. I read every line. Dana said, "You always take that long?" If more people did, I'd have less work. Paul's mouth twitched. I crossed out a clause that described me as supporting Whitlock's dispute with Ward Environmental. In the margin, I wrote assessing custody and Courier controls. Paul read the change, nodded, and initialed it. Dana initialed harder. By 8, I was sitting in a borrowed visitor cubicle with the handling plan open beside the Courier agreement. Whitlock Foods operated 3 plants that produced shelf-stable sauces, spice blends, and powdered drink mixes. The samples from the day before came from a cooling water validation after maintenance on a production line. They were not dramatic-looking things. 12 clear bottles in molded foam, each containing water that could pass for something left on a conference table. Their value was in when and how they had been collected. The handling plan required refrigerated transport and laboratory accession within a fixed period. Ward Environmental coordinated collection, documentation, and courier transfer. Whitlock owned the Courier account because its negotiated regional rate was better than ours. Ward had administrative access to schedule and adjust pickups, not cancel them as leverage. The agreement contained a provision for service suspension after written notice of non-payment. Whitlock wasn't behind. A proposed pricing amendment had been circulating for 2 months, but Dana had rejected the premium routing tier because the existing contract already included the service Grant was trying to sell back to her. At 10:20, Paul rolled his chair to my cubicle and handed me a printed email. Legal says you can review this. You can't keep it. The email had been sent by Grant at 2:38 the previous afternoon, 3 minutes before the cancellation. The subject was operational continuity. Dana. As discussed, current service levels cannot continue without execution of the proposed amendment. Please confirm acceptance to avoid disruption. Grant Dana's reply, sent at 2:40, was one line. Nothing was discussed, and Whitlock has not authorized disruption. At 2:41, Grant canceled the pickup. At 2:43, he fired me. I copied the timestamps into my notes. Paul rested a shoulder against the partition. Does that answer Dana's question? It answers part of it. What part is left? Whether this was a terrible decision made once or a terrible decision made into a process. He considered that. You know, procurement does have expressions for things, I'm sure. Ours are just less elegant. My personal belongings arrived that afternoon in 2 copier paper boxes, delivered by a Ward field technician named Owen Pike. He set them inside my apartment doorway and kept both hands in his jacket pockets. Grant made me sign a list, he said. Of my possessions? Of what he put in the boxes? Did my yogurt make the inventory? It was discussed. I lifted the flap. My framed certification, 2 pairs of safety glasses, 4 coffee mugs, a rain jacket, and the ceramic dish where I kept spare cooler keys were packed beneath a layer of brown paper. No yogurt. He said food couldn't be transported. Sound compliance judgment. Owen looked down the hallway. He had worked at Ward for 6 years and could carry 2 full coolers up 3 flights without breathing hard. Now he seemed afraid the potted plant across from my door had a microphone. I'm sorry, he said. Were you there? No. Then don't apologize. His jaw moved. Maribel said the pickup was canceled after you confirmed it. I didn't answer. She said Grant deleted the route note. Don't tell me things you'll be asked to deny later. I'm not denying it. You work there. You have a mortgage. Don't hand me a sentence because you feel guilty in my hallway. His eyes came up. He changed the seals. What? This morning, no more orange tape, white generic tamper strips, no initials. He said the old system was inefficient. The ceramic key dish shifted in my grip. Orange tape cost $12 more per case because it took permanent ink without smearing and split into a visible pattern when lifted. Celia had chosen it after a client cooler arrived with one latch open and everyone spent 2 days arguing about who had touched it. Why remove initials? Owen gave a small, humorless laugh. Efficiency. He left before I could offer him water. The next morning, my professional association emailed to say the regional quality panel had been restructured. My name no longer appeared on the program. The chair, a consultant named Beverly Karn, called 6 minutes later. I wanted you to hear it from me, she said. I just heard it from an automated email. Yes. Well, I wanted you to hear the context from me. Grant called. A pause. He expressed concern that your employment status had changed. My knowledge of cooler seals survived the transition. He also said there may be a confidentiality dispute. Is there? He implied one. And that was enough? Beverly sighed. The panel is sponsored by 3 firms that work with Ward. There were polite ways to make cowardice sound administrative. Beverly knew all of them. "I understand," I said. "I hope you do." "I understand exactly." After we hung up, I opened my calendar and deleted the rehearsal blocks I had protected for the panel. 8 empty hours appeared across 2 weeks. It was astonishing how quickly a life could become available. At noon, I found an envelope from my insurance administrator in the mailbox. My coverage would end on the last day of the month. Continuation premiums were listed on the second page. I sat at the kitchen table with the insurance letter, the termination notice, and my bank balance arranged in front of me. The tiny orange fleck from my wrist was still stuck to the termination letter. I had pressed it beside Celia's signature without thinking. I called 3 independent benefit brokers, created an invoice template, and registered a business name, Ward Chain Solutions. Then I stared at the name. It sounded like a hardware store operated by a woman with no imagination. I changed it to Clear Trace Logistics. At Whitlock, Dana gave me access to 2 years of Courier invoices and route changes. Most were ordinary: snow delays, locked gates, production shifts, one notation that simply read, "Driver chased by goose." Eli had added, "No injury." Goose remained on site. The cancellations were harder to interpret. Some had been requested by Whitlock. Some came from Ward after documented collection changes. 3 contained no supporting note beyond client requested. All 3 occurred on Friday afternoons. All 3 were followed by resampling charges from Ward Environmental the next business day. Dana stood over my shoulder while I arranged the records by date. "You found it." I found 3 unexplained cancellations. By Grant? The Courier exports only show Ward Administrator. Yesterday's showed his name. Because Eli printed the live authorization receipt. The historical export rolls users into the company profile after 30 days. She swore softly. "We can request the detailed audit history," I said. "From Eli?" "From the Courier's account team. You own the account." Dana reached for her phone. "Email," I said. She stopped. "Why?" "Because you want the request and response documented. Ask for original cancellation timestamps, user identifiers, and any notes. Include the specific dates. You enjoy telling me not to call people. I enjoy records that exist after everyone gets nervous." She sat on the edge of the desk and studied the 3 invoices. "Our finance department paid these." They look normal by themselves. They were $16,000. That's why they look normal. $16,000 is small enough to move through a company like Whitlock without becoming a meeting, and large enough to matter to Ward. I didn't say it. Grant had been trying to improve recurring revenue before Halcyon's review. 3 premium resampling charges would not transform the sale, but a pattern of clients upgrading after service failures might. My temporary Whitlock email chimed. The sender was Grant. Dana looked at the preview and raised an eyebrow. He works fast. The message was addressed to Paul, Dana, Whitlock's general counsel, and me. Ward Environmental Services has learned that a former employee is accessing confidential operational data and communicating with company vendors in violation of her continuing obligations. Any analysis based on proprietary WES procedures is unauthorized and unreliable. We request immediate cessation and preservation of all materials. A second message arrived before anyone answered. This one came from Celia. "Lena, please do not make this uglier than it already is." Dana read the screen over my shoulder. "He copied your aunt?" "My aunt copied herself." "Are you going to answer?" I looked at the 3 Friday cancellations, then at the handling plan Whitlock had written and the Courier records from the account Whitlock owned. Yes. I removed everyone except Grant and Celia from the reply. I am reviewing Whitlock's procedures, contract records, and Courier account data at Whitlock's request. I have not accessed Ward systems or contacted Ward employees. Please identify any specific material you believe belongs to Ward. Before I could send it, Dana said, "Add something about yesterday." "No." "Why not?" "Because yesterday's receipt is already telling the truth. It doesn't need me to sound angry beside it." I sent the message. Grant replied 9 minutes later. Return the deviation memoranda you removed from company premises. I read it once, then again. The deviation memoranda were my signed copies, made on the days I submitted them, and kept in the accordion file that had lived in my desk for years. Grant's demand told me two things. He had searched my office, and he was more worried about those pages than the Courier receipt. Dana saw my face change. What? He finally identified the records he wants. Do they help us? I don't know yet. At home, I opened the second box Owen had delivered and lifted out my rain jacket. Under it lay the blue accordion file, its elastic band stretched white with age. The first deviation memo concerned a broken refrigerator alarm. The next covered a mislabeled bottle kit. I turned through ordinary failures, each one dated, signed, corrected. Then I reached the memo Grant had ordered me to revise. A core logistics optimization was clipped behind it. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, almost hidden beneath the print margin, were 3 route codes highlighted in yellow. They matched the 3 Friday cancellations. I didn't send Dana a photograph of the spreadsheet. I put both pages back in the accordion file, closed the elastic band, and called Paul. I found a document that may explain how the dates were selected, I said. It came from my office, and Ward is claiming it as company property. Then don't send it. I wasn't going to. Good. Our attorneys are already billing us for the privilege of using the word alleged. The route codes are enough for me to know what to ask Whitlock. That sounds dangerously like work. I need collection schedules for the 3 canceled pickups, any cooler photographs, and the service invoices before and after each date. Paul was quiet for a moment. Can you use what you learned from the document? I can't unknow it, but Whitlock can examine its own records for its own reasons. The 3 cancellations were already identified before I opened the file. Write that down exactly. I just did. The next email came from a law firm whose letterhead occupied the top quarter of the page. It accused me of retaining Ward property, interfering with customer relationships, and misappropriating confidential procedures. It demanded that I stop work for Whitlock and surrender every copy of every company document in my possession. At the bottom, Grant had added a personal note beneath the forwarded message. This is your last chance to handle this within the family. I printed it because some sentences improved when they had physical weight. Then I placed it beside the insurance premium notice. Grant believed within the family meant a room where he controlled the door. I hired an employment attorney for 1 hour. Her name was Anita Feld, and she worked from an office above a dental supply company. She did not promise to ruin anyone. She read the letter, asked 6 questions, and told me her hourly rate before offering an opinion. The signed memos are complicated, she said. They concern your work and your termination, but they also contain company information. Preserve them. Don't distribute them. Let me respond about return or inspection. I can't afford a long fight. Then don't have one. Most expensive fights begin with people paying lawyers to express their personalities. What about Whitlock? You can work for anyone who hires you unless you signed a valid restriction that says otherwise. Did you? No. Did you take a client list? No. Pricing models? No. Trade secrets? Grant once called our laminated cooler cleaning chart a trade secret. Anita looked at me over her glasses. Was it? It said to use soap. That may be safe to disclose. She charged me for the hour, not the joke. I paid from the savings account I had labeled New Start during my divorce and hadn't touched since. The Courier's audit history arrived the following afternoon. Dana printed it and brought it to the visitor cubicle without speaking. All 3 earlier cancellations had been entered through Grant's named administrator profile. The notes were nearly identical. Client request schedule change. Whitlock's collection logs showed no schedule changes. One cancellation came 14 minutes after a sample technician photographed a sealed cooler at Plant 2. Another came 22 minutes after collection. The third occurred while the cooler was already locked inside Ward's transfer refrigerator. How do we prove that last part? Dana asked. There should be a refrigerator access log. At Ward. Yes. So we don't have it. Do you have the cooler photo? She slid it across the desk. The cooler sat on Ward's stainless steel intake cart. Behind it, partly visible, was the old refrigerator door with its rectangular temperature display. The orange seal crossed both latches. My initials were not on that one. Maribel's were. A digital timestamp appeared in the corner. Dana tapped it. Before the cancellation. By 31 minutes. So it was ready. It was at Ward, sealed and within temperature. And Grant canceled anyway. Yes, she sat in the other chair. For once, she had no next sentence prepared. What happened after? I asked. Dana opened the invoice file. Ward told Plant 3 the sample had missed its courier window due to late release by site personnel. We paid for recollection and urgent transport. Who authorized the charge? Finance. It was under the exception threshold. What did Grant offer after that? She searched her email. A minute later, she turned the screen toward me. Following the avoidable delay, I recommend moving Whitlock facilities to priority assurance coverage to eliminate future schedule risk. He created the risk, she said. He controlled one part of it. You're still qualifying. I'm writing a report someone hostile will read. He fired you, which guarantees someone hostile will read it. The laboratory timestamps came from Kim Alvarez, the accession supervisor at Northline Analytical. Dana requested them through Whitlock's client portal. Kim supplied receiving times, temperatures, bottle conditions, and exception codes for each resampling event. The original samples had never reached Northline. The replacement samples had arrived under rush status, billed at a premium. Kim included a note asking whether Whitlock wanted its sample contacts updated. Grant had emailed Northline that I was no longer authorized to discuss any client work, including historical accessions. Dana began typing a reply. Don't add me, I said. You need to ask Kim questions. Through you. This is ridiculous. It's clean. It's slow. That's what clean often feels like. She gave me a look that suggested cleanliness was overrated, then asked Kim to join a documented call as Whitlock's laboratory contact. Kim appeared on video wearing safety glasses pushed on top of her head. Stainless steel shelves lined the room behind her. She had the brisk, compressed manner of someone who measured lunch in minutes. I can verify what entered our building, she said. I can't tell you why something didn't. That's all I need, I said. We walked through the accession records. On each replacement event, Northline had received newly collected samples with new bottle numbers. None of the original bottle numbers appeared in its system. Kim clicked through a ledger. There was one inquiry from Ward about extending the hold time. Dana looked at me. When? I asked. Kim gave us the date of the second cancellation. Who asked? Grant Mercer. What did you tell him? That the method-defined hold time couldn't be extended by client preference. And after that, he requested rush setup for replacement bottles the following Monday. Dana muted herself and said something I was glad the transcript would not capture. Kim waited. I asked, Do you have the inquiry in writing? Yes. Please provide it to Whitlock with the accession packet. I can do that. After the call, Dana closed the conference room door. Finance wants to accept Grant's credit. What credit? Full reimbursement for the 3 resampling events plus 20% against next quarter's service. He sent it this morning. That's a good offer. Her face sharpened. Good. If this is only about recovering the charges. He interfered with our samples, and your finance team sees $16,000 returned, no testing failure, and a vendor willing to discount future work. You sound like Paul. Paul is irritating because he's often describing the room accurately. Dana walked to the window. Below us, a tanker eased backward toward a loading bay, while a spotter guided it with 2 orange flags. Halcyon sent us a vendor questionnaire, she said. I looked up. They're reviewing Ward's major accounts as part of the acquisition. Grant's credit requires confidentiality and renewal through next year. There was the competent move. If Whitlock accepted, Grant could tell Halcyon the dispute had been resolved, lock in the account, and describe the credit as a routine commercial adjustment. He would lose money now and preserve the sale later. Does finance know about the questionnaire? I asked. They know. And legal? Yes. What does Paul think? He thinks there are 3 separate decisions and everyone is trying to make them one. That sounds like Paul. What do you think? I turned the cancellation audit toward her. I think you hired me to assess the custody controls. I'm not going to tell Whitlock whether to take a settlement. You really won't give me one convenient answer, will you? I can tell you that Grant's proposed confidentiality clause would prevent you from giving Halcyon a complete account of the service failures if their questionnaire asks about them. It does. Then your lawyers need to decide whether his clause and their question can coexist. Dana folded her arms. You could at least pretend this is satisfying. It cost me $400 yesterday to have someone tell Grant I'm allowed to earn a living. Her expression changed. I hadn't planned to say it. Money embarrassed me more than anger. Anger could be dressed up as principle. A shrinking bank balance sat there in its underwear. Dana pulled out the chair beside me. Why didn't you build that into your fee? Because I didn't know he'd send a law firm. You knew he'd fight. I knew he'd make noise. You underestimated him. Yes, it was the first time I had said it aloud. Grant was not reckless in the usual way. He read contracts. He remembered renewal dates. He knew which clients cared about process and which cared about invoices. He had canceled pickups in amounts small enough to disappear, then sold the prevention of the disruption he created. When one cancellation became visible, he offered enough money to make visibility inconvenient. Dana said, "Submit an amended engagement budget." No? Why? Because Grant threatened me. Because the scope expanded when he challenged your access and forced documented vendor coordination. That benefits Whitlock. Exactly. We pay for benefits. I looked at her. She shrugged. I can also be irritating. The amended budget covered Anita's review and another week of work. Paul approved it with a note. Still cheaper than litigation vocabulary. Grant changed his approach the next day. He sent Dana a concise operational plan. Ward would centralize all Courier instructions under his office, remove technician identifiers from seal records, and replace the orange tape with standardized white security strips. Each change was described as reducing inconsistency. Dana forwarded it to me. I read the section twice. Without initials, Whitlock could prove that a cooler had been sealed, but not who had witnessed its condition. With Courier access concentrated under Grant, the same person who negotiated service levels could alter pickups without a second approval. The changes did not correct the failure. They removed the details that had exposed it. My final report was no longer difficult to write. I described a custody system vulnerable to unilateral commercial interference. I listed the controls Whitlock should require from any coordinator: account owner, confirmation for cancellations, dual approval after collection, named seal witnesses, automatic notice to the client, and direct laboratory acknowledgement. I did not use the phrase "Grant created the delays." I didn't need it. The timeline occupied 1 page. Dana read the draft in silence. At the end, she said, "You didn't mention the acquisition. It isn't a custody control. You didn't mention your firing. It isn't a custody control either. It happened 2 minutes after the cancellation. Then it belongs in Whitlock's account of the incident, not my technical findings." She closed the report. "You're making it very hard for him to call this personal." "He'll call it personal anyway." My phone rang. Celia. I let it vibrate once, then answered. Her voice sounded different. Not softer, smaller. "I need you to come to the office." "For what?" Halcyon postponed the management meeting. I looked at Dana. "Why?" "Whitlock has not returned their questionnaire." "That's between Whitlock and Halcyon. Grant says you're advising them to hold it." "I'm not. He says the 3 cancellations were lawful service decisions. Then he can explain them. He has. Halcyon wants supporting records." The old refrigerator in Ward's sample room would contain the access logs for at least one sealed cooler. Grant knew that. Celia knew it now. "What do you want from me? I want to see what you have before this goes any further." "Grant's attorney says what I have belongs to Ward. Bring it anyway." I thought of the accordion file, the stretched elastic, and the orange fleck pressed beside her signature. "Will Grant be there?" "Yes." "Then Dana comes too." "This is a family discussion." "No," I said. "It stopped being one when he canceled Whitlock's account." Celia's breath caught, almost too quietly to hear. Then she said, "Tomorrow, 4 o'clock, the old sample room." I hung up before she could turn permission into a favor. Dana was watching me. "Finance rejected the credit this morning," she said, "and Halcyon's questionnaire is due at noon." She lifted the original Courier receipt from the report binder. The thermal paper had already begun to fade, but Grant's name was still visible. "I'll be there at 4. The old sample room smelled like bleach, cardboard, and the burnt dust that collected behind the transfer refrigerator. Celia sat at the stainless steel bench wearing a gray suit I hadn't seen since the bank refinanced the building. Her cane leaned against the cabinet. Grant stood beside the refrigerator with a binder open in front of him, one palm resting on its pages. He looked at Dana. "This is inappropriate." Dana set her laptop bag on the bench. "Canceling my Courier was inappropriate. This is a meeting." "It's an internal employment dispute." She placed the original receipt beside his binder. "That isn't." I set my accordion file beside it. The room seemed smaller than I remembered. A strip of white security tape hung from the wall dispenser where the orange roll used to be. Celia looked at my file. "Are those the documents Grant asked you to return?" "They're the copies I made when I signed deviation reports. Anita Feld has offered Ward's counsel an inspection while we determine how they should be handled." Grant gave a soft laugh. "You hired an attorney. You hired one first. I hired one to protect the company. So did I." His expression changed at that, but Celia spoke before he could. "Sit down, all of you." There were 3 chairs. Grant took the one beside Celia. Dana sat across from them. I stayed standing until Celia noticed, then pulled a plastic stool from under the accession counter. Its legs scraped against the floor with a sound that brought back 9 years of sore feet and reheated coffee. Celia folded her hands. "Halcyon wants clarification about the Whitlock account. Grant says there were 3 service disputes that were resolved through resampling credits." "They weren't resolved," Dana said. "We offered full reimbursement." "You offered reimbursement on the condition that we renew and keep quiet. That's a commercial settlement." "It was a commercial settlement for conduct you described as client requested." Grant leaned back. "Your plants failed to adopt the revised service schedule. We never accepted a revised schedule. You were notified. You attempted to sell us coverage we already had." They had clearly had versions of this argument before. Grant knew the section numbers. Dana knew the dates. Neither needed the binders. Celia turned to me. "Show me what you found." "I didn't find it inside Ward. Whitlock found it in its records." I slid the 1-page timeline across the bench. Each row began with a collection time, then cooler seal photograph, pickup confirmation, cancellation, resampling charge, premium service offer. The 4th row was the day Grant fired me. Celia read slowly. Her thumbnail stopped beside the 241 cancellation. "Grant? I've explained that decision." "Explain it again." He looked at Dana rather than Celia. Whitlock had been receiving priority assurance service while refusing the corresponding amendment. I suspended a discretionary pickup to force a decision. "It wasn't discretionary," I said. "Our agreement gave us control over coordination, not over their Courier account. We had administrative access." Dana tapped the receipt. "Access is not ownership." Grant's jaw tightened. "Your samples were not destroyed." "Because my Courier ignored your attempt to send him away." He followed the account owner's instruction. "That's how the system is supposed to work." "And the other 3 times?" Celia asked. "Those plants were notified of schedule changes." Dana opened her laptop. Show me. They were operational communications. Show me one. Grant turned a page in his binder. This isn't a document production session. No, Dana said. It's the meeting where you hoped the receipt would become a misunderstanding if you used enough syllables. Celia's mouth moved, almost a smile, then settled. I opened the accordion file and removed my deviation memo with the spreadsheet clipped behind it. I placed only the memo on the table. This is the objection I submitted 3 weeks before I was fired. I wrote that removing Friday coverage would cause collected samples to exceed their handling limits. I identified the affected root codes. Grant didn't look at the page. You refused to implement a management decision. I refused to certify that it met the handling plans. You don't decide our commercial model. No. I decide whether I put my name on a false operational statement. There it is, he said, looking at Celia. Every disagreement becomes an ethical crisis. Every adjustment is a betrayal of the sacred cooler. We were carrying unprofitable routes because Lena couldn't distinguish good practice from unlimited service. I proposed a collection calendar change, which clients would reject. Then we negotiate. We were negotiating. After their samples had been collected, Grant pushed away from the refrigerator. Do you know why Halcyon became interested in us? Because I took a company running on favors and memory and gave it predictable revenue. I renegotiated laboratory rates. I standardized proposals. I converted one-off accounts to annual agreements while you were still writing bottle numbers by hand because you liked the pen. I felt the point land because part of it was true. Grant had walked into facilities where managers barely remembered our name and come out with 3-year agreements. He could read a room before I finished checking whether the presentation cable worked. He had made Ward look larger, steadier, and easier to buy. You improved the business, I said. He paused. So I'm not allowed to question you? You're allowed to question me. You're not allowed to sabotage an acquisition because you lost an internal argument. I didn't contact Halcyon. You gave Whitlock a report designed to make us look dangerous. I gave Whitlock a report designed to keep one person from canceling collected samples without the client knowing. Celia looked toward the white security tape. Why did you change the seals? Grant's answer came quickly. Standardization. Why remove initials? Technicians were applying them inconsistently. You didn't retrain them? It was unnecessary. I stood and crossed to the refrigerator. A plastic log sleeve hung from a hook on its side. The current sheet had Grant's new format: date, cooler number, status, no technician name, no seal identifier. I opened the lower cabinet and found the archived logs arranged by month. Celia had designed that cabinet herself. She believed clipboards wandered because people gave them the opportunity. Grant said, "Those are company records." "Yes." "Then stop." I did. "You retrieved the sheet for May 17th. His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "One of Whitlock's cooler photographs shows this refrigerator at 3:12. The pickup was canceled at 3:43. If the old process was followed, the access log will show who secured it and when. I'm not indulging this." Celia picked up her cane and stood. "I am." She crossed the room slowly. Grant moved as if to help her, but she waved him away. She found the May folder, carried it to the bench, and placed it in front of Dana. The entry was halfway down the second page. 3:10 p.m. Cooler W-1847 received. Seals intact. M. Soto. At 3:43, Grant's administrator profile had canceled the pickup and recorded client request, schedule change. At 4:06, he had emailed Whitlock to report that site personnel released the samples too late. Celia sat down again. Grant closed his binder. "This is exactly why we need centralized records." "No," I said. "This is why you removed names." "That's absurd. The orange seals showed when a cooler had been prepared. The initials showed who saw it. The Courier history showed who canceled. You changed all 3 controls after they aligned against you." "I changed a sloppy process after an employee used it to attack management. You fired that employee before the receipt printed. Dana turned the receipt so Grant's name faced him. The paper had faded another shade. His authorization line remained readable. Celia stared at the access log. Did you know those samples would expire? Grant looked at her, and for the first time, I saw him calculate the cost of lying to someone who already had the answer. They could have been recollected. That isn't what I asked. Yes, he said. I knew the window. The refrigerator motor stopped. In the sudden quiet, a truck changed gears on the road outside. Grant spoke more carefully. Whitlock had delayed that amendment for 8 weeks. Every discussion ended with Dana saying she'd take it back to finance. I needed a point of pressure. So you created one, Dana said. I suspended a service on our account. You were never going to lose production. This was water in bottles, not a shutdown. Worst case, we recollected the next morning. The next morning was Saturday, I said. He looked at me, which would have demonstrated the value of premium coverage. There it was, not a mistake, not confusion about the contract, a demonstration. Celia's voice became very quiet. And Lena? She had already made it clear she would undermine the plan. So you fired her in front of Dana. I removed an insubordinate manager before she contradicted me in front of a client. You had my letter prepared. I had authorization. Celia glanced at her signature on the termination notice in my file. A contingency authorization. She refused a direct instruction. The contingency occurred. You placed 3 signature pages in the acquisition packet. Grant's face hardened. You read them. I trusted you to describe them honestly. He looked almost offended. I was protecting the transaction you asked me to complete. Celia pressed both palms against the bench. Her knuckles were pale. I had wanted this moment in several ugly forms. In all of them, she turned toward me immediately. She apologized without qualification. She understood everything I had swallowed for years. Instead, she said, "How much does Halcyon know?" The old herd arrived right on schedule. "Not enough," Dana said. "Our questionnaire is due today." Grant stood. If Whitlock characterizes routine contract enforcement as misconduct, Halcyon will reduce its offer or walk. They asked about unresolved service failures, Dana said. We're going to answer. You'll damage a local vendor over $16,000 you've been offered back. Dana closed her laptop. This stopped being about the invoice when you used our samples to manufacture a sales example. He turned to Celia. Tell her what this sale means. I know what it means, Celia said. Then act like it. I put my deviation memo back in its file. You have a choice, I told Celia. Disclose the cancellations and the control changes. Halcyon will price the risk, and you'll decide whether the sale still works, or don't disclose them. Whitlock answers truthfully, and if Halcyon asks me about the termination, I answer truthfully too. Grant laughed once. That sounds like a threat. It's a boundary. You always did love giving ordinary stubbornness a procedural name. Maybe, but I'm not asking for my job back. I'm not asking Celia to give me yours. I'm telling you what I will do if someone asks me a direct question. Celia looked at me then. Really looked. You wouldn't come back? She asked. No. Her face seemed to loosen around the edges. Grant collected his binder. If you disclose this, you're reducing your own sale proceeds. Celia rested one hand on the old access log. No, she said. You already reduced them. Halcyon did not walk away. Its revised offer arrived 12 days later, lower by enough to hurt and high enough for Celia to accept. The buyer required the 3 resampling charges disclosed, the Whitlock account excluded from projected renewal revenue, and Courier cancellations placed under client-controlled approval. Grant could remain through transition, but not in client operations. He declined. His departure agreement paid part of the compensation he had expected, and none of the performance bonus tied to the original price. He spent his last 2 weeks transferring contracts to people he considered less talented. He was mostly correct. On his final afternoon, he emailed me. You got what you wanted. I answered because silence would have let him choose what I wanted. You still think this was about making you leave?" He did not reply. Celia sold the company and kept consulting for Halcyon 3 mornings a week. She called me twice before I answered. When we finally met, it was at a diner where the sugar packets had hardened into bricks. "I signed without reading," she said. "You signed because he made it comfortable not to read." "Yes." She stirred coffee she hadn't sweetened. "I thought you would always tell me if something was truly serious." "I did. I thought you'd tell me in a way that didn't sound like every other objection. That was convenient, too." She absorbed it without defending herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "It wasn't large enough to cover everything. It was clean enough to keep." ClearTrace began with Whitlock's 2-week review, then a 3-month control project. Dana did not hand me the company's entire logistics operation. She gave me one facility and a performance schedule that required evidence instead of affection. I missed one proposal deadline while comparing insurance plans. I lost a prospective client after Grant described me as difficult. Another hired me because the same description sounded useful. Owen referred a metal finishing plant after he left Ward for a field position elsewhere. Maribel stayed with Halcyon and sent me a photograph when orange seals returned to the accession room under the new procedure. Beverly Karn invited me back to the professional panel. I told her I was available if the published program identified me as independent. She took 2 days to agree. The first full-service cooler under ClearTrace's Whitlock contract arrived on a wet Thursday morning. Dana stood behind the lobby glass while I checked 12 bottle numbers against the custody form. The new orange tape split cleanly from the roll. I pressed it across both latches and wrote my initials over the seam. Eli came in, shaking rain from his jacket. "Construction on Bell Avenue," he said. "I know." He scanned the label and printed the pickup receipt. Before lifting the cooler, he looked from Dana to me. "Who owns the account?" I ran my thumb once across the dry ink on the seal. "The client does."